Phew. We have the technology. Okay. Thank you all for coming. I can't swear I'll stand still. I am terrible at presenting from behind a lectern. So I'm also very aware that I think I'm the only thing separating you from beer at 5. So we need to get moving. So I'm Mark Scrimshire. I am, for the last couple of years, I've been working at CMS as both their Blue Button innovator and developer evangelist. So what the hell does that mean? Well, after 2.5 years, in March, Seema Verma stood up at HIMSS and basically said, we have an API. And that's basically what I've been working on for 2.5 years. So it was a big moment for me. I'm going to run through some of this really quickly so that maybe we can get on to questions and hopefully I can give decent answers to those questions. And maybe even show you a bit of our API and the developer documentation and so on that we have. So a little bit of history. I do actually like to go even further back. So one of the important things is HIPAA. Everybody's heard of it, right? 1996, yep. The P stands for portability, believe it or not. It's taken us 20-odd years to learn that. Back in 2010, a group of really bright individuals got together somewhere in DC, and someone came up with the bright idea of, wouldn't it be great if you could log onto your portal and you could press the blue button and you could download your health data and take it with you. And this was really phenomenal stuff, right? So over the course of a few months, the VA, the DoD, and CMS got together, and they actually you can still do it today. Go to the Medicare, My Medicare portal. You can log in with your Medicare credentials if you're a little older than me, and you can basically follow the blue button and download your health data as a text file, or if you prefer it in a pretty version as a PDF, and you can take it with you. And that's great. You have 3 years worth of data about all of the claims and a bunch of other stuff. Well, the industry's moved on a little, so we now have APIs. So you've been hearing all day about FHIR, and FHIR is wonderful. It's really been a breakthrough. And the various government incentives that went out mean that we've now got 92% of hospitals, I think it is, have digital EMRs. About 80% of doctors' practices have practice management systems. So our data has gone digital. Well, as I say, I spent the last 2.5 years at CMS with the idea of creating this data service for Medicare beneficiaries. Because the problem with the text file is if you come back on a regular basis for your data, you can say, yes, I'll take my 3 years worth of data, and there it is in a text file. I have lost 3 weeks of my life trying to parse that file. It's not fun. I'm not a great developer. I'm not a great coder. You guys are probably a lot better than me. And the thing is, if you've got that 3 years worth of data, we're updating this on a weekly basis, right? So the first thing you've got to do is say, 98% of that file I've got to throw away because I've already had it. And I don't think it's changed, but I'm not sure, right? Well, FHIR really addresses a lot of that. So what we've done is release this. The other thing that happened, and this is really important, about the time of starting on this project, you heard about Devon McGraw if you've been in some of the, John Halamka mentioned her this morning. And Devon and a bunch of other folks like Lucia Savage helped to put out a clarification to the privacy rule. Nothing new, just clarifying. But a couple of key things in there. One was it allowed us as patients to direct our data to a third party. Now, the other thing it did is it allowed us to give that permission electronically, right? So you no longer had to go and knock on the doctor's door and say, can I have my records? And the situation still isn't perfect today. And a little aside, my doctor's office closed down, and they did deign to let us know that they were closing. And then, a month later, get this letter in the mail saying, you can have your medical records. Great, I thought. Okay, I've got a direct address. Let's fill in the paper form and, said, send it to my direct address. I want it electronically. So great. Then I had to find a fax. How many people have got a fax at home, right? So I found the fax, and sent this in, and lo and behold, about 2 months later, I got a wad of paper in the mail, right? This is the situation we have today, still. But this was a real help in clarifying the situation. And in fact, when we went through actually getting our Blue Button API through the various barriers we have to go to at CMS, it's not a simple process of getting an app out there or getting a new system launched. We actually took the recommendations and advice that the OCR had published on their website and turned it back on them, saying this is how we're doing it, right? So they did a really good job. They really helped us to argue against themselves. So what we've done, I'll just gloss over this, but there's an important thing. A lot of people throw at us that Medicare beneficiaries don't know how to do digital, right? And I'll tell you the story. I was in Vegas for Seema Verma's announcement, and I was doing a bunch of presentations on this. And the day after the announcement, my sister, who's a doctor in the UK, got a message to my mother, via email. You imagine that, using email. My mother is, in this case, Betty is our persona, one of our personas on our API. And she's supposedly a 70-year-old sprightly lady in Cleveland. And, well, my mum is 82, living in the UK, dealing with multiple conditions. And she FaceTimes me in Vegas to congratulate us on actually releasing this API. The point of this really stupid story, really, is that there's an increasing community of beneficiaries out there. They don't have to understand the technology. We don't have to understand the bits and bytes. But we're comfortable FaceTiming with our grandkids. We're comfortable, dealing with a Fitbit. My mum beats my butt pretty well every week in steps because she walks the dog every day. And I'm usually sitting behind a computer. So we have this growing community of people that are comfortable with digital, so why aren't we servicing them? So one of the things we've done with the API, and let me just put this really in context. People ask me, so what's the Blue Button API? Well, okay, who's technical in the audience? Hopefully you're all going to say yes, come on, why else are you here? The way I tend to describe it at a sort of high level, it's consumer-directed exchange sitting on top of OAuth 2.0 and REST APIs using FHIR as the data interoperability layer, right? Does that make sense? Yeah? Cool. So we put together this API, and we're using FHIR. And this is actually an example. Hopefully this video will work. This is a sample app that was put together by one of our developers. So what would happen is a beneficiary would log in, would connect from an app, and would fill in their Medicare credentials, and they'll hit the sign-in button. This all works on a smartphone. They then get the prompt to do, yes, do I approve access, right? And lo and behold, before they know it, they're back in that app, and that app is now able to pull that data and start to do something useful. And that's where you guys come in, because you now go build these great apps that are going to do fabulous things for Medicare beneficiaries, right? And hopefully for other consumers across the health space. So this was just an app, say, from one of our developers that, and what they did, they pulled in our data and started putting it into a timeline, just to make sense of that. Now the thing is, that is magic, and that's great. And it was literally that simple. Fill in your user ID, fill in your password. If you can't remember it, we've even made that, it works on your cell phone. You can go and create an account, you can reset your password, you can find your username if you need to do it, and come back and just authorize the app, okay? We also set it up on a set it and forget it model. So again, I think we're pushing the boundaries here, right? HIPAA right of access, set it and forget it, okay? I don't know how we managed to get that through the government, but we did, right? So for that magic to happen, though, we, as developers, have to do a fair bit of harder work, right? We have to deal with OAuth. So we've actually spent a fair bit of time on documentation, sample information out there. So we have a synthetic data set on our sandbox with 30,000 Medicare beneficiaries with effectively about 2.2 million claims as an explanation of benefit resources. So it's realistic data. I'm not claiming it's perfect, but it's one of the big challenges we have is always test data. Everybody has that problem. So for us as developers, you know, what would you do as a developer? You might come in and look at our documentation, bluebutton.cms.gov, fairly easy to remember, but you'll just Google it. You can log in and you can register an app. So if you've done this on Facebook, it's pretty well the same thing. We don't claim to be as slick as Facebook, but you'll get your client ID and your secret. You can go put that into your development environment, and you can start interacting with the synthetic data, right? You know, we make it look really easy, but I know I always struggle with this stuff as well. And then you may come back in and want to look at more detailed documentation. So we've got various help things along the way. What is the syntax you want to use in curl? What are you looking for in terms of, I need to get the access token? And then you create your magic application, and, you know, what are you going to do with it? Well, you want to get it into production, okay? So we even have the information on there. This is a little out of date now. We've actually got the production verification process is detailed there. So you will apply to us and do a demo and show us it. And the simplest thing I'd say is what we're looking for is no surprises for the beneficiary. We do not want you getting the beneficiary's data and then doing something, underhand with it, because they are trusting you with their data. And that is critical. Everything in healthcare is about trust, and that is no less important with you as a developer. So don't be like Facebook. Did I say that? Sorry. I do say my job is I get paid by the US government to cause trouble inside the US government. Sometimes I go a bit far. So we realize this is all about the apps. And the thing is, if I'm a patient, I don't want the data for its own sake. I don't want to paper the walls of my house with it, right? It's about the most useful thing you could probably do with all of that data. And I'm not joking. I know, and I was at a presentation and a guy said, I helped my dad download the old Blue Button text file, and he made the mistake of printing it out, right? And he said, it was only 1,700 pages, right? How do you make sense of 1,700 pages of paper? In Courier New font. So it's all about the apps and the APIs, right? So let's actually dig in a bit. So what have we got? Sitting in the cloud, in the CMS environment, we now have data for 53 million Medicare beneficiaries. Now, before you start salivating, you get production access, you get zero access to any data. Each individual beneficiary has to come to your app, authorize your app, and let you receive just their data, okay? So if you want to have 10,000 beneficiaries' data, you've got to go recruit 10,000 beneficiaries, and they, in the flow of your application, have to give you permission, okay? So what we've got there then is we've got Medicare Part A, B, and D. Does that mean anything to anyone? Okay, so for those of you who don't, Part A, and I'm not doing this the official way, Part A is the hospital stuff. You go to hospital, they produce this mammoth bill, right? That's a claim, right? We get that in detail. So that's Part A is the hospital. Part B is basically the professional stuff. You go to your doctor's office, or you get a wheelchair or something like that. There'll be a claim. If Medicare pays it, it's Part B. Then you go to the pharmacy. You go to Walgreens or CVS, and you get some medication that the doctor prescribed. That appears on Part D. And usually the next question is, what about Medicare Advantage? Well, Medicare Advantage is Part C, but those are all private companies. They're Medicare Advantage payers. And so they deal with beneficiaries their own way. And one of the things some folks at CMS have said is, should we pull that data in? Well, we sort of get some of it, but it can be a year out of date. What use is that to us as patients, right? So I have actually said to them, you really should get the Medicare Advantage companies to do what we've done, publish an API just like us. Now, When I set up this project at CMS, the blue button that was being published had 3 years worth of data. So we started our process of building our database a year ago. And don't tell him, we haven't thrown anything away yet. So now we're at over 4 years worth of data, right? So you're already 30% better than the text file, right? So, and we see that growing, and we're just debating at the moment, do we extend that to maybe 10 years? Because that could be useful for researchers to be able to really look back over a claims history. And we're pulling this from a database that has data on beneficiaries going back to like 1998. There is a great resource at CMS if you're a researcher called the Chronic Condition Warehouse. I think go to ccwdata.org. And if you are researching, you can get access to a lot of this data de-identified. This data is identified to the person. It's not de-identified data. That's why you have to be very careful about keeping the trust of beneficiaries that share the information with you, okay? So let's sort of dig under the covers a bit about what we're doing. So what we're doing, I said before, we are enacting the HIPAA right of access of a patient to say, give me my data. Or in the words of a resident here, e-patient Dave, give me my damn data, right? So they have the right to transmit it and share it. And you saw the process that we went through where they said, I authorize. We basically convinced the Office of Civil Rights and the Office of General Counsel at CMS that that is effectively a consent. You know who they're sharing the data with, you know who they are, you know what data they're sharing, for how long. You could take all that data, put it onto a form that's called a consent form, and you basically got consent, right? So we've actually, I think, been influencing a lot of discussions that have been going on around what is the consent process? How simple can it be for us as patients to get our data and share it, right? So, you know, whether you call it consent or direction or whatever, but that's the process. It's the OAuth 2.0 process. So if we go to the left side, what we're doing, you've been hearing this all day, you know, you've got FHIR. So we actually worked with the financial management work group and defined the explanation of benefit resource in STU3, right? It previously was a stub, and we said, actually, I was too lazy to, and thinking of you guys as well, I'm using guys in the generic sense, okay? So, you know, I was looking at how do we present this data, and it'd be like 15 resources, and then how, as a developer, am I going to stitch that back together and make sense of it? So we said, well, the EOB, the explanation benefit, is a patient-facing document. So let's define that. And so we pulled in resources like claim response, and eligibility, and all of those things, using the same field names and put them into the EOB. And we already know there's a bunch of payers out there that are using that resource in STU3 to share data with some of their vendors, right? So we're pretty confident we got it pretty good. There'll be some tweaks in release 4 of the FHIR spec. But OAuth 2, you know, we're a technical group here, so you probably understand. This is used billions of times a day, whether it's Facebook, Google, LinkedIn, Twitter. Everybody's using OAuth, so that we know this works at scale. And so we've leveraged OAuth. We've leveraged the scope specifications in the FHIR specification as to what resources we're releasing. Okay, but what we've done is spent time working, what do beneficiaries want to deal with when they're saying yes, right, and agreeing to that scope, because you get into this balance of how complicated do you make it, right? So we've tried to simplify it, but we're always listening to the community about what we're doing. So let's move on. So I think we'll skip over this. The key point, it's about the data and it's putting the data to use. The more important thing is we are going to be supporting Smart on FHIR in the API. So if you're building a Smart on FHIR app, you'll be able to use it with Blue Button. We're actually partnering with NIH to make sure that works. So they had to, for the All of Us initiative, they had to actually go out and change their clinical data set they're using because they're working on Argonaut's STU2 spec. And EOB didn't really exist there, so they are adding our EOB into that. And for our part, we are making sure that their test frame will be able to hit our API and actually work. So we're funded by the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Trust Fund at HHS to do this in addition to the original work. So we're enabling beneficiaries with the touch of a button to donate their data to science. So if they feel that there's something that really drives them, they want to do it either for themselves or for loved ones to donate to research, they'll be able to do it. So it's all about the apps. It's all about what magic that you folks can create. It's not about the data, it's about putting it to use. So that's what we're really focused on. When I started out on this project, somebody came at me and said, are you going to produce a diabetes, app? And if you talk to some of the folks like at the VA, they said, the government is actually really bad at user interfaces and user experience, right? So what we've done is we've built a pipe that you can connect to and let you do the magic. I have this belief that we're heading to a world in healthcare where healthcare is like your smartphone. If I pull out my iPhone, I doubt it's going to look the same as anybody else's. And what we will end up doing is piecing together our personal health solution in a bunch of 5%, 10%, 15%, 1% solutions that meet our needs. And for that, we need things like FHIR as that underlying interoperability layer. So, we're really looking for you to do that. So just to brag a bit, we have to. We launched back in October at Health2I, managed to sneak our API out the door, and we got like 10 people signed up because we didn't really have any decent data on there. But the key thing, the best advice I ever got from Peter Levin when he was CTO at the VA was get the API out the door because it's very hard to shut it, right? So that was a critical milestone. And then it's around January, we took this nice 2.2 million synthetic claims records, or EOB records, and got them into our sandbox environment. And we went into HIMSS in March with about 100 organizations on our sandbox. You can all sign up. It doesn't cost a thing. So just go to bluebutton.cms.gov. We came out of HIMSS with 200 organizations. And I just haven't updated this slide because I don't want to go through the rigmarole of getting it approved through the powers of be at CMS. We're over 350, right? So we also actually have apps in production today. And so we're just taking it nice and slow. We're really happy. I love what Apple has done around supporting the Argonaut spec. I'm just really glad they haven't come to us with, 10 million Medicare beneficiaries that they want to turn on at once. We're scaling this. We built this in the cloud. Actually, last week, AWS had an outage in the availability zone 1. Our API kept going. So we built this to scale. We're just trying to scale it as we go rather than suddenly go from 0 to 10 million. So we can, how are we doing for time? Oh, 15 minutes. So we can actually do a bit of fun around. So one of the things, I said we've tried to make this so that we can actually get you going quickly. And so one of the things we did, I wonder if I can just bring this up and go full screen. Let's try this. So our documentation site is actually, I've got over here, is just bluebutton.cms.gov. So you'll see in there that you can go in and sign up, okay? Sign up for free, get an account, and you can now start playing with creating your own apps. But one of the things that you typically would then want to do is, wrong tab, but we have produced an implementation guide, okay? So again, that's useful. Another thing, again, buried deep in the documentation, you'll wonder, how do I find those users? Well, you see this bit over here. The BB user, 5 zeros, going through to 29999, with, imagine what the password might be, PW, and the same number and an exclamation, right? If you know that secret, and you can find it in the documentation, so there's your test for the week, right? Go find that. You can get at any one of those 30,000 records, those users. But the other thing we did, here's the information about how you go through getting production API access. But if we're on the sandbox, we can actually, this is where you hope that the internet works, you can use our test client. So we can follow the flow. And this isn't designed to be really slick like Apple would do, because partly we want you to see what's going on. So here's the actual link of what we're going to link to. This would be behind the, that's more or less what you'd bury in your app, saying, do you want to share your Medicare information with us? And so I've come from your magic app that's going to do wonderful things, and I'm now a Medicare beneficiary, and I'm going to put in my password, my user ID and password. Let's think of a number, and let's see if I can actually remember to do that. Capital P, capital W. Don't do this at home, folks, or definitely don't do it with your real credentials. 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, exclamation, and let's try signing in. And I got it wrong. See, I'm really bad. Oh yeah, see, that was a really good test there. You were paying attention, right? So you can come and give the rest of the session. 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, exclamation. Let's try that. So you see, so now I'm being asked if I want to approve this application's access, so test app. We're actually doing some refinement on this after getting some feedback from beneficiaries. We've done some focus sessions. So do they want to release 4 years of their Medicare claims, their profile and demographic information, allow the app to create copies because they're actually pulling the data down. And they can come back and get updates. We're updating the Part A and B every week, the D monthly. So I'm going to say yes. And so now, again, you would not present this to the beneficiary, but you might want to see what's going on. So we're going to take the access token, and I've got an exercise that you can find me on one of the tables over the rest of the week, and we can go through it. And I've actually produced a little callback handler that'll show that and then create a kill string that you might be able to do. So you want to go and look at a completely raw patient record. So we have a bunch of resources. Here's the patient record. And if you know FHIR, you're going to see, oh, look, there's the name, and it's got the family name and all of that stuff. And we've got, and this is fictitious data, so it's not necessarily the greatest thing. One of the things I am looking to do is to get them to change the address format. This is a CMS coding structure. I've actually documented on our support group where you can understand what state 51 means, for example. So we've got the patient resource, we've got the coverage resource. So at the moment what we're doing is just saying, have you got Part A, B, or D? So it's a bundle of 3 resources. One of the things I would like to see is for us to get all of the other secondary insurance information so that it's available. We discovered now that is available to us. We've just got to work on adding that. And then the real big kahuna here is the EOB. So each EOB, so what we return is a bundle, but each EOB goes down to the claim line level. And so you may have literally hundreds of these, and so you would just page through and start to drill down into that information. So it's got things like diagnosis codes. It's got the provider's NPI. So you can start to do some interesting things around finding what does that data mean. And that's really where we're saying, hey, here's the data, you do the magic with it, right? So you see that, if I signed onto the site, within, 30 seconds, you can actually be starting to look at real data, right? Well, real fictitious data. So we also have on the site a support group on Google, so we're constantly listening to what you've got to say and trying to make tweaks, and if you find problems, we dig into it. If you want to sign up, say you can do it for free. There is also, just to make clear, there is no cost to the beneficiary in using this, and there is no cost to you in using this. I am trying to talk to CMS saying, well, if Facebook came along with 100 million users, maybe they should be contributing, but we're not there, right? So you can use this for free. We also started publishing a blog, so if you want to see the actual hands-on exercise that we can go through, it's there on the blog today. including the callback handler. It's got some instructions on how you can just create your own app, get your own unique code, and so on. So with that, we have about 7 minutes till beer time. So why don't I open it up for questions?
Do you have like samples for .NET developers, like C# samples?
Do we have samples? If you actually go to dig into the blog, we currently have two. We have a sample application that's a Node.js application, and we have another one which is a Python Django. Again, we're constantly looking, and all of this, everything that we have produced is open source. So I have no problem. If you want to produce a C# application and put it out there, let us know. If you are interested in what we've actually done under the covers, if you go to GitHub and you go to CMS Gov and you go into the CMS Gov account, any repository prefixed with blue button dash is all open source stuff we've done. That's everything from the pipeline, the code to actually launch servers with Ansible, the back-end happy FHIR server we're using, we've done changes to that, the Python Django front-end OAuth application, the code that builds and deploys that as well. It's all there if anyone wants to use it. There are also the code for the sample apps are there, okay? The callback handler that I produced just for this exercise is sitting on my own personal account because it takes me almost an act of God to go and get something added to that repository, right? So, but yeah, we want to look at, a lot of things. What you'll find in the documentation is a lot of examples in curl. So if you can translate the curl stuff to your own preferred language, fine, go ahead. Yes?
Understanding that, developers are not reselling the data, what's the most common revenue model for people creating apps?
I think what you're going to find, we've got some folks that are researchers, right? So you think of some of the big companies with research arms. They're on our API. There's folks that are aggregators, so that they are doing the heavy lifting for you. So there's a couple of apps like that you can go and just like Validic has done a great job in the wearable space of saying, let's take all of these different wearables and create a common API for you. So there's a couple of apps out there that do that, and so you pay for the ease of use of that. There are others, like medication adherence apps, where they've got their own models with, whether it's dealing with pharma, for example. There's a couple of other scenarios. I see two sort of scenarios really taking place. Well, maybe three. One is research. Okay, so I'm at NIH and I want to be able to recruit patients onto a research program. Go do that, right? The other is, do I have some sort of personal health record application, right? So I want to allow a beneficiary to pull their data down. And then the other is what I call the check-in app. So you could see there's no reason why a doctor's clinic, so we've even got EMR vendors on our sandbox because you could see them implementing the ability when you turn up at the doctor's office to say, do you want to share my CMS data? So an example might be dialysis. You're diagnosed with renal disease, so you've got to go for dialysis. You turn up at one of the big dialysis clinics. They know nothing about you. Imagine being able to say, here's my data and it's up to date from about 10 days ago. Now they can look through your medications, they can look through what you've been diagnosed with to date, and now they can start to tailor their care program to your specific needs. Because what happens for a lot of those vendors is about 2 months later than you turning up, CMS works out that you are now attributed to them and they will now start sending you the same sort of information. But it's 2 months late. It's that onboarding that's probably the most valuable part of the process. If we can streamline that, there's benefits. So I think you're going to see like doctors' offices and clinics finding use for this data.
I love it. It's a great thing. I'm wondering about Medicaid data. Is that at all in the same
Funny you should say that. There's some things I can't say. Now, one thing I have to say is I am not actually a CMS employee, so I cannot say anything that you can take as being the gospel of CMS, right? Have we got that clear, right? Okay. So one of the most interesting and actually rewarding things personally of late has been all sorts of folks approaching us and saying, and if you listen to Seema Verma's speeches of late, she's basically put the payer industry on notice saying you should meet or exceed what we've done. So we're being held up as a model. You know, and I say we've just got claims data, but imagine if the VA was to implement Blue Button 2.0 with that massive clinical data that they've got, right? So that we could have apps that can pull this different data. So there's discussion sort of going on about what is the Blue Button 2.0 data set for example, the commercial payers? Well, you could say the same thing for Medicaid, but the issues, you come down to the same issue. I'll probably take a little bit of an issue with Abigail, a previous talk about the OAuth piece. OAuth is authorization, right? I give you permission to do something. The first thing you've got to do is authenticate. And that's really in the OpenID Connect space. And so in the Medicaid space, the biggest challenge really is if you're a citizen of a state, because Medicaid is really dealt with at the state level. So our challenge is we don't want to see 51 different implementations of Blue Button API, one for each state. You as developers do not want to see that, do you? You'll say, yes, I do not want to see that, right? Okay. So the challenge is, has a state got an ability to allow a citizen to authenticate? If they can authenticate, then they can authorize. If they can authorize, then their next challenge is, where does Medicaid get their data from? Is it from a managed care plan? Is it from their own data warehouse, whatever? They've now got to do the same work we did of mapping. We mapped 1,300 different data elements into FHIR resources to make this happen. So that the Medicaid agencies or their nominees, the managed care plans, have got to do the same thing. But there are discussions sort of swirling around about how do all of these different groups like Medicare Advantage, commercial payers, Medicaid, do like we've done. So it's sort of, let your voice be heard that you want it to happen, right? So, how are we doing? We've got like 30 seconds if there's one last question. Otherwise, I'll happily talk about this over beer. Yes? I saw in the far corner a bar. Thank you.